Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, we're going to take a look at the discography of a band that's been asked for by many of you. It's a band I've liked for a long time. They got a fairly substantial catalog with some definite high notes and maybe some lower notes, right? But still a good band overall. We're talking about Nektar. Essentially a British band, but a band who relocated and lived in Germany for many years, and that's kind of how most folks always seem to call them, a German band, but they actually weren't a German band. They were a British band who relocated, and they had a big fan base in Germany, but actually they've had a big fan base here in the States as well. A beloved band for many years. They recorded all throughout the 70s, broke up for, right at the start of the 80s, and didn't resurface till the beginning of the 2000s, and they've been fairly steady since then. So let's get to the rankings, shall we? We're looking at 13 albums here in total. Okay, there's two other studio albums. There's a studio album which is basically a bunch of covers. We're not going to talk about that. It's where the band went into the studio and did their own renditions of all sorts of classic rock and prog classic songs. We're not going to talk about that one. And then there's something that came out a few years ago under the moniker of the New Nektar. So there's almost like this kind of two factions going on here: the New Nektar and actual Nektar. The New Nektar is a previous keyboard player from the band, not an original member, who put together a new version of the band, along with the late Roy Albrighton's son on drums. They're going under the name of New Nektar. They have an album, I believe it's called Megalomania. I'm not going to review that, not part of this, but we're just going to go by all the official Nektar stuff here, okay? So let's start off with my number 13, the Lucky 13. Not so lucky in this instance, for an album called Man in the Moon from 1980. So this was to be the last album from the band for many years. Okay, 20 to be exact, 21 actually. This sees Roy Albrighton coming back. Roy, of course, is the guitar player and vocalist, the late guitar player and vocalist, who was a big part of the Nektar sound all throughout the years. Why don't we talk a little bit about that classic lineup, right? So the classic lineup of this band, just so get that out of the way first here: Roy Albrighton on guitars and vocals, Mick Brockett on lighting and projections and visual effects. He was basically a member of the band, traveled with them all over the place to make sure the stage show, got all those cool effects and things going on. Alan Taft Freeman on keyboards, backing vocals, and Hammond organ, mellotron, pianos, all that sort of stuff. Ron Howden on drums and backing vocals, and Derek Big Mo Moore on bass and vocals. Okay, so that's the classic lineup of the band. So here we have, from 1980, again, a little bit of a makeshift version of the band. The 80s are coming. Prog is kind of like, if it's not dead, it's on its last legs, right, so to speak, at least from the classic bands. Very poppy and kind of lifeless album for me. I've just never been a big fan of this album. A couple tracks are okay. Telephone, Can't Stop You Now, title track, okay stuff, but I just find not a lot of interesting tracks on here. It's not prog rock hardly at all. Again, decent enough songs, but just, I don't know. It doesn't even really speak to me much on a commercial level, like on a pop rock album. It's just not, the songs are just not very memorable and just not overly interesting. Cool cover notwithstanding. Not surprising they kind of went their separate ways at this point and decided to do other things. All right, next up, let's go to the follow-up to this, 21 years later, from 2001, The Prodigal Son. So we got Roy and Taff joining forces again, along with a guy named Ray Hardwick on drums. The trio put this album out called The Prodigal Son. It's got some, I saw them live at Nearfest right around this time too, which I thought was very good. This album is decent enough. It's got a pretty good song called I Can't Help You. The opening Terminus / Oh My lengthy track is pretty good. The title track is good. Overall, it's decent. It's kind of slightly bluesy in spots. It's just kind of missing something. Not a bad album. It's not a terrible album. Great album, not really. But I think as a kind of return from the band after so many years, I think a lot of us at the time were kind of like, all right, this is pretty good, right? It's not too bad. Listening back now, it's okay. It's a decent enough album, right? Next up, number 11, we're going to go to Time Machine from 2013. Cool album cover. Purple Pyramid Records. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Title track is pretty good. Mocking the Moon's got a song called Tranquility on there. Juggernaut. Good. Good, solid, latter period Nektar album, I think. You really can't go wrong with this. It just shows the band is still really trying to kind of capture that early sound. Doing a pretty decent job of it. Number 10. How about Book of Days from 2008? Pretty decent album. I think there's a definite, like I said, these two, some of the more latter stuff, there's a definite kind of feel of the early stuff. They're really trying hard to recapture that early magic, which is really good. King of the Deep, really good song. The Iceman is cool. You got the 2-part Book of Days on here. Solid stuff. And in fact, if you get the this 2020 reissue, you've also got a bonus disc which has Roy Albrighton's solo album called The Follies of Rupert Treacle, which is pretty decent as well. All right, next up, number 9 from 1977, Magic as a Child. So here, Roy had left the band for a couple years. In comes a guy named Dave Nelson who replaces him on guitars and vocals. Does a pretty good job. I think this is a pretty fun, enjoyable album. It's kind of a little more accessible prog and lots of hard rock, catchy tunes, plenty of good guitar and keyboard work. It's a fun album, fun listen. Got a couple of the highlights, Eerie Lackawanna and Train from Nowhere, two of my favorite tunes on here. And it's funny because this was actually recorded at the House of Music in West Orange, New Jersey. So, you got a couple songs about trains. And actually the Eerie Lackawanna was the train line that ran through northern and central New Jersey back in, the 70s into the early 80s. So before it kind of became New Jersey Transit. So interesting how they wrote a couple tunes on here about the trains. But also that model right there on the front cover, that is a very, very young Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields, the famous actress and model. Okay, this is her. I believe she was like 12 years old when she kind of posed and modeled for this cover here. Pretty interesting bit of info there, right? All right, next up, number 8 from 2004, Evolution. Another cool album cover. Another good album, Old Mother Earth. What else we got on here? Phased by the Storm, Dancing into the Void, After the Fall, Camouflage to White. Good album. Probably, maybe, well, we're going to get to that soon, but in fact, in a minute. One of the more successful from a kind of songwriting and just overall execution perspective of a lot of the albums that have come out since they got back together in the early 2000s. So very, very cool album there. I think, though, my favorite out of all the Nektar more recent stuff, the more modern stuff, is The Other Side, which came out last year, 2019. This, of course, the first album post the death of Roy Albrighton. So here you've got a revamped lineup, which let me read that to you here as soon as I find it. So here you've got, and we have a full review of this here on the channel for you if you want to check it out. You've got Mick Brockett, of course, back on all the visuals. You got Ran Howden on drums. You got Derek Moore on bass and vocals, and then you've got helping out here also in the band. You've got on bass Randy Dembro. You got Reich I can never say his name. Reich Chlanda on guitars and vocals and things. He actually a long time member of various prog acts throughout the years, and Kendall Scott on keyboards. This is, again, you got half of them are classic members of the band, half are newer guys. This is a very sensational album. Despite the, lack of Roy Albrighton, who's always been kind of the guy in this band, I think they do a very good job here of recapturing a lot of the magic of the early Nektar classics. You got I'm on Fire. Skyrider is a terrific song. Love is the Other Side. You Can't Be More Like You. What else we got here? Devil's Door. Fantastic stuff. I really like this album quite a bit. All right, so now we get to the kind of the meat of the Nektar catalog here. So coming in at number 5, the top 5 here. Hold on, top 6, number 6. Sorry. 6. Number 6 is going to be their first album from '71, Journey to the Center of the Eye. I know there's going to be folks who are going to probably want to rank this higher. I like this album. I think it's still Nektar kind of in their infancy. This is kind of like their psychedelic space rock album, start to finish. That's basically what you get here. Mellotron and organ galore on here. You got the Dream Nebula parts 1 and 2, which is absolutely terrific. Classic songs from the band. Burn Out My Eyes is another great song on here. A lot of really cool guitar work, and it's just got a trippy vibe, kind of like like early Pink Floyd and Hawkwind type of stuff, right? Good album. Cool cover art there. Just very different for the band. It's like they never really did a full-on album quite like that. Next up, number 5, 1974's Down to Earth. All right. The guys have done quite a few concept albums in their day. Here's another one. Kind of, a little bit about life as part of a circus, so to speak. The difference with this album here, this was a big shift from all the stuff that came before it. They kind of, though it's a concept album, they went with shorter songs. All right. Different musical elements popping up in the band here. You got, a little bit of funk, some pop, some boogie, a little bit of psych influences, right? Along with their, hard rock and prog like they normally do. But some really kind of very alluring, memorable songs on here. Like Nelly the Elephant, That's Life. You got their hard rock and boogie of Fidgety Queen. Oh, Willie's a great track. Just a very kind of charming, endearing album, I think. It's I know a lot of people really dig this album a lot, and for a reason. It's quite good, although different. But that's the thing about Nektar. It's like all of their albums, especially early on, each one is very different from the next one that would come out. All right, number 4, going to go with 1975's Recycled. Another concept album. This is all about, the environment. How can we save the environment? Which was a big deal even way back then, right? It's a big deal now, but even back in the 70s, big deal. So this was basically made up of 2 side-long tracks broken down into segments. So all the segments are, titled, obviously, but, it's part 1 on side 1 of the vinyl, part 2 of side 2 of the vinyl, each like about, 17 and a half, 19 and a half minutes long, roughly about 38 minutes worth of music here. Fantastic. You got Larry Fast on guest synths on this album. Really good, upbeat, synthy prog, little bits of fusion noodling going on here. Just a really good album. You got great guitar work from Roy Albright and as well as his vocals. This was one of his stronger albums from a vocal perspective. Alan Taft Freeman's keyboards, the organ and mellotron, electric piano, all that kind of stuff, just all over the place here, and a great match with Larry Fast and his like Moog synthesizers and all the other equipment that he used. It's like, to me, when I listen to Recycle, this is kind of like Nektar's Relayer from Yes. Like Yes had Relayer, which kind of like is a little bit of an oddity in their catalog because it doesn't sound like anything else they ever did. It's very fast paced, very fusiony, just big and bold, a lot of complex time signatures. That's kind of this album for Nektar. So if you've never really listened to Nektar before and love Yes, this is probably their most kind of like straight on, full on 70s progressive rock album, even though lots of prog in their other albums, but this album a little bit different. Very successful from an artistic point of view. I like that album a lot. Next up, we're going to go with number 3 with 1973's Sounds Like This. Another kind of interesting album. So here's a double album from the band. They decided to go into the studio and record this album live. Okay, so everybody just kind of cram themselves into the studio and just pound out these songs, and it comes across almost like a real heavy rock live album in a way, but it's recorded in the studio. Lots of heavy, crunchy Hammond organ and guitar in this album. If you love like heavy Deep Purple and Uriah Heep, this is the Nektar album to get. It's got all sorts of great stuff on here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a heavy instrumental jam. It's kind of funky. It's got good wah-wah guitars. You got the opening Good Day, which is like a memorable anthem. You have the heavy, loud prog space rock epic Do You Believe in Magic? Cast Your Fate has a very cool Uriah Heep sound to it. Day in the Life of the Preacher is just absolutely blistering heavy rock with some scorching Roy guitar solos. Then you got Odyssey, which kind of finishes out the album. That's like a lengthy, like 14-minute long, kind of bluesy jam with drum solos and guitar solos and very, very cool stuff. So it comes across, like I said, like a live album, but it's recorded in the studio, right? And it's all new material and stuff like that. So it's very, very cool. Nice lengthy tunes. A lot of jamming on here. A lot of heaviness on this album. Easily their heaviest album by far. And let's see. Now we're going to work our way to the top two. The top two for me are absolutely legendary albums. I could flip-flop these at any time, but I think I've always kind of liked one just a little bit more than the other. I'm going to go number 2 to their 1973 album, Remember the Future, which for a lot more, you're going to get a lot of other people who are going to be like, that's easily my favorite. So it's another one of, this is like Nektar's Thick as a Brick. Okay, where we had Recycled was like Nektar's Relayer from Yes. This album is kind of like their Thick as a Brick. It's all one long track, okay, spread out on 2 sides of vinyl. Remember the Future Part 1 and Part 2 each. We got 16 and a half minutes long and nearly 19. So again, about 35 minutes long here. Just really good rockin' symphonic prog. Lots of Hammond organ, blistering guitar work, funky rhythms at times, complex passages, killer vocals, a lot of sections of these again, kind of like Thick as a Brick. You have these kind of like sections which kind of like just lead into another, and a lot of them are just absolutely super memorable, either from a musical perspective or vocally. Just a really, really great album, and surprisingly, this album was a big seller for the band and got them plenty of like FM rock radio airplay, especially here on the East Coast. There's if you kind of go back and study the history of Nektar, actually a lot of the DJs would play snippets or squeeze in as much of this as they could, like late at night, which is pretty cool, I think. Great album. All right, so my favorite, my number 1. I really dig this album a lot. Of course, if you know this catalog, you know what's coming. 1972's A Tab in the Ocean. Another concept album, right? All sorts of interesting musical ideas happening here. 4 lengthy tracks. They're all stupendous. This, again, is hard rockin' Nektar with just really some dramatic overtones going on throughout this album. It starts off with a title track, A Tab in the Ocean, which again is like, 15 minutes long or thereabouts. Just great guitar and Hammond organ work. Really nice layered vocals from the band, because most of these guys contributed vocals, either lead or backing, which is really gave them a really big full sound. You got Desolation Valley, which is quite rocking, Crying in the Dark, another great song, and then the final track is just big and bombastic, and it's dramatic and it's dark. It's King of Twilight. It's just got these heavy riffs and great Hammond organ, thunderous drums. Just a really, really great album, great artwork, and a classic of the early Nektar discography. So there you have 13 Nektar albums for you to check out. Tab in the Ocean, my favorite, coming in at number 1. Number 2, Remember the Future. Number 3, Sounds Like This. Number 4, Recycled. Number 5, Down to Earth. Number 6, Journey to the Center of the Eye. Number 7, The Other Side. Number 8, Evolution. Number 9, Magic as a Child. Number 10, Book of Days. Number 11, Time Machine. Number 12, The Prodigal Son. And number 13, coming in last, Man in the Moon. I will say, I like all these albums. Probably easily my least favorite is this one. Even this has some good moments. But I would think, anything, start at my top 5 or 6. You really can't go wrong there. If you're not familiar with the Nektar catalog, I can heartily recommend any of those to you, like absolutely immediately. Just go out and get them. I think you'll dig them. So there you have it. Nektar, the great British / German heavy prog band that debuted in the early 70s, and they're still going strong to this day. So check them out if you haven't. In the comments below, if you want to list your favorite Nektar albums, go right ahead in the order you prefer them. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. We all kind of love these albums differently or the same. It depends. But I think, fans of Nektar dig them, and there's a good reason why. Good band. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. So we'll see you tomorrow morning with another episode of Deep Cut Dive. Jack Toledano's coming on the show. We're going to give you some deep cut recommendations from the studio catalog of Southern rock legends Lynyrd Skynyrd. So that's coming up tomorrow. As for what else is coming up on the Deep Cut Dive in the next days and week ahead or so, what do I've got ready for you here? Hold on, let me just kind of pull up my list here. We got coming up, we're going to be doing some Coliseum soon, okay? And I'm going to do a little combo show of Coliseum and Coliseum 2 all together. And I'm also planning on doing, over the next week, the Groundhogs, great British heavy blues rock band who released quite a few really great albums in the late 60s into the early mid-70s. So that's kind of coming up relatively soon. All right, we got other stuff planned in the weeks ahead. I know a lot of you have been asking for a Steve Hackett solo album ranking. We're going to be doing that. That might take a little bit. We've got Stephen Reed and I are going to be doing over the next week or two. We're going to be doing the studio albums of Dokken, as well as Arena, as well as Alter Bridge. So that's coming up soon too on the Ranking the Album shows. So stay tuned for all that, right? And we'll see you real soon. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.